This is why this subject of relationship diversity is so important because it takes the shoulds and the have-tos out of your relationships. It releases the societal programming or rules that someone else has determined makes a relationship good. Relationship diversity says, who am I and what do I really want in my relationship? Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions, who am I and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. When I was 12 years old, my parents went through a really nasty divorce. In the blink of an eye, my entire life was turned upside down. It came out that my father was having an affair with a family friend. My mom was understandably angry, and in my eyes, my beloved dad fell from grace. My parents yelled at each other like never before. It was actually the first time I had ever seen them argue. In my entire 12 years, I had never witnessed them even yelling at each other. But everything changed. They were not only yelling, they were pushing each other, blaming each other. When I went to school, kids were talking about me behind my back. I heard the whispers, the mean giggles, the pointing fingers, and I was really filled with shame and embarrassment. This was the moment where most of my early relationship beliefs were formed, and they then informed my own relationships, or lack of relationships. I never really dated in high school, and very rarely in college. And even in those times, it always seemed that the guy lost interest, or the guy broke up with me. And after college, I moved to New York City to get into casting and theater. I got into a relationship that I thought was it. I thought he was the one. We talked about kids. We talked about marriage. We met each other's family. I spent time at his place in Brooklyn. And out of seemingly nowhere, he told me that he was still in love with his ex-girlfriend. This was about 6 months into our relationship. I was devastated, to say the least. But it was the thing that led me to my spiritual awakening. A book came into my lap. It seemingly just fell into my lap. I don't even remember how I got it, but it was called A Woman's Worth by Marianne Williamson. This was an eye-opening book for me. It was the moment that I realized, oh, I'm not only my body, I am also something much bigger than that, even though I didn't really understand what that was. And that became my deep dive into the unknown, into the non-physical, into my spirituality and understanding what that even meant. And I spent the next several years in that deep dive. There were relationships, there were hookups, there were breakups, there was heartbreak. But I continued on my path, and I was rewarded, I thought, from the universe by a man named Matthew coming into my life. And we met through a friend of a friend, and he lived in Arizona at the time and then moved to California. And we hit it off fast. And I went out to visit him. Within a month, we were engaged. He moved into my New York City apartment with me. We had an incredible friendship. I had never had a relationship like that in my life. He was an intuitive healer, and he taught me a lot about energy and how that played out in the physical world. And it was just an incredible friendship. But it was not one very important thing. It was not a sexual relationship. We didn't really have a sexual life. And I remember thinking that when we first met, I didn't even really care about that. I just wanted to be seen and loved and cared for by a man who wasn't going to break up with me. me. And so we had a 6-year relationship, and it was really amazing in a lot of ways. However, one day he came to me and he said, I think we could do better. I think we could have the beautiful friendship that we have with someone else in the addition of having a incredibly passionate sexual life. And he didn't feel that that could happen with me, and I didn't feel that that could happen with him. And so he asked for a divorce. And there I was again, heartbroken and broken up with. And I came to a fork in the road. This was a choice point in my life. And the choice was either I close off my heart forever and just say, well, I tried, but I just kept getting hurt again, and I don't want to get hurt again and again and again, so I'm just going to stop. Or I could make the decision to go into it with the most courage I ever had. And that's what I chose to do. A friend of mine came to me with 2 names, and she said, I want to tell you about these 2 people who could help you. One was a Vedic astrologer, and one was an energy doctor. And just something in me said, that is the energy doctor. That's who I want to go to. And I started seeing this doctor 2 times every week and went into it and found some huge pain that I had buried so deeply. With the support of my friends and this practitioner, I was able to go there and come out in so much of a truer version of who I am, not who I became from the divorce. I took the blame off of my father and really looked at, from a soul perspective, what I was creating and what I was wanting to experience and how that divorce served me and made me the woman that I am today, or that I was in that moment. It was so powerful. And I knew that the healing had happened when my father flew out to Las Vegas, where I was, and we sat in the car and had the most incredible conversation where I heard things that he said that I, 1, always wanted him to say, and 2, that I never believed I would hear him say. And we had a real joining together. The other way that I knew that that healing was monumental was because my experiences with men were different, completely different, ever since that time, and has continued to this day. After that 3 months of healing, I found my way to my next relationship. I met this man backstage at the show that I was directing. And we had an instant connection. We were both going through divorce and both on a very deep spiritual journey of understanding what had led us to that moment. He confided in me that he had had affairs. He had cheated on his wife through most of their marriage. And this was really an important creation for me because the me before the divorce, or the me before my healing, would have run so far away from him because it would have triggered everything from my parents' divorce. But instead, I claimed my experience and I went into it with a different mindset. And I had a conversation with him about why he felt like he did that. And I think that there was a part of him that felt like monogamy was never really his truth. And so from that perspective, I told him that I would like to continue our relationship. However, I don't want to do any lying. I will not stand for lying. What I am open to discussing and looking at is not having the restrictions of a monogamous relationship because I don't think that worked for him. And what was more important to me was not being lied to. So I said to him, if there is anyone that you're interested in being with, just be honest with me and let's talk about it. This was so empowering for me because that was our 18-month relationship. And it didn't happen a lot. It was actually very few times did it happen with him and also happen with me. And I got to really go into my fears and really look at the idea of jealousy, which we will go way into in this podcast. But it was a really incredible experience, challenging but incredible. And it shifted me out of a victim mentality and into an empowered mentality and an empowered um, experience. I took ownership of my life and experience. I loved my relationship with this man. It was, again, a huge lesson. And I knew it also wasn't everything that I wanted. So I wrote down and visioned the kind of relationship that I wanted. And what I learned from that open relationship was that I wanted to create something that was not defined by societal constructs, by what society said the kind of relationship I should be in. I wrote down specifically the vision was we choose to live our own life. It's not dictated by societal programming. And this came from the belief that I am uniquely me and that the person that I meet who is uniquely them will create a unique relationship that is unlike anyone else's. This is when I found that I was the absolute happiest in my relationships. They were and continue to be the best when they are designed by the people in them. So this has become all of my relationships since that time, right after my divorce. And we'll go into more of that on future episodes. So let's briefly talk about what relationship diversity is, at least the definition that I'll be working with through this podcast. I think this is important so that we join together in a common perspective of relationship diversity. Relationship diversity is all the varied ways we relate to ourselves and others in our intimate relationships. And we can start and will start with the broadest categories. And I talk about those as solo amory, monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, and there are subsets and substructures within all of these. We'll go into more specifics of these very soon. One thing I want to say is that I don't personally advocate for any of them because I'm not you and I'm not the person or people that you're in relationship with. And I'm not the one that can tell you one way is better than another. The only person who can tell you that is you. But even after we talk about the broader structures and the substructures, the real gold lies in the in-between. It lies in the uniqueness that I was referring to before. And this is my biggest message with relationship diversity. Greek philosophy has a lot to teach us. Inscribed on the Temple of Apollo is the words, know thyself. Know thyself. Great wisdom that applies to relationship diversity in the context of this podcast means design your unique relationship from your unique self. And that starts with knowing yourself. The concept of relationship diversity at its best centers around that, knowing yourself, and also the idea that we are in the flow of life when we are continually evolving and growing. The only constant is change. Typically, we'll resist this and we're just going to hold on to something to feel safe. Relationship diversity works best, or the exploration of this works best, when instead of resisting the natural process of evolution because of fear, we instead lean into it, acknowledge it, and accept ourselves as fully and completely as possible. When we're doing our internal work, living in this fluid, dynamic energy, communicating compassionately with others, the possibility of an inspired and full life are endless. You may be wondering, who is this Carrie Jaroslaw? And why is she talking about relationship diversity? Well, first I want to get the titles out of the way. I'm a best-selling author of the book, Why Do They Always Break Up With Me?, about my relationship journey and also talking about the steps to heal from heartbreak. I'm also a speaker, a conscious relationship coach, and intuitive. Okay, now that that's out of the way, here's who I really am. I'm someone who does my own inner work, first and foremost. I live in the belief that I'm always evolving and that life isn't stagnant. I've experienced many different intimate relationship structures and have learned from all of them. And although my circumstance is most likely different than yours, I've traveled the path from woundedness to truth, to healing. I started doing intuitive coaching and energy healing in 2001, and this was a new world for me because I was able to reach parts of myself and others that only years of talk therapy would touch. This real deep energy healing was really transformational. After that massive healing that I went through after my divorce, I wanted to write about it and teach people about divorce. The book was called Divorcing Differently, and it never happened because life happened. I met my husband. We got married in 2007. We had 2 children and made a huge life change. And so it really wasn't until 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, that I knew that book had to be written. It didn't end up being Divorcing Differently. It ended up being Why Do They Always Break Up With Me? But it was the same idea of sharing with people how I went from woundedness, heartbroken, and feeling like relationships would never happen to me, to meeting my soulmate, my partner, Lewis, and having our family together. Since then, I've been coaching people. I've been speaking more publicly about conscious relationships. And just want to take a moment to define conscious relationships because I think it's important. First, I'll talk about what unconscious relationships are. Unconscious relationships are what is shown to us everywhere through movies, through TV, through our families, through society. And that is that my partner is separate from me. My partner can hurt me. I blame my partner. It's my partner's fault for me and for my sadness and for my dysfunction. And that it comes from an unconscious place, a place of blame. So conscious relationships is about having the awareness of what is going on within me. And even if I don't have the awareness, my commitment is to understanding why what my partner did really, really upset me. So it is about me going inside, me doing my internal work, understanding my inner world, my inner triggers, and how my past affects my current relationship. So when I get into an argument with my partner, I go inside and ask, why is this upsetting me? And then I go and do my inner work. So that's the difference between conscious and unconscious relationship. And conscious relating takes radical responsibility for my own healing. And you may be saying, how could I have had anything to do with my partner going and having an affair? Well, there always is a reason. There's either a belief, a limiting belief, or something from our past that creates the world that we see. It creates the color of glasses that I put on. Like for me, I believed that men always cheated on me. And so guess what? That's what I always experienced until I changed and shifted my internal world to shift what was going on and what I was attracting to me. This perspective, although challenging, is so empowering because I know that if I can do my internal work and shift what's going on within me, I can have a different experience outside of me. And I do. I have had it happen over and over again. And the hundreds of clients that I work with have experienced the same thing. When people come to me for relationship coaching, I find that they are unfulfilled. They don't even really know who they are. They've hidden themselves from a place of safety to keep themselves safe. There's always a reason, and that's important to identify. They're uninspired. They're held back from their own personal evolution, and they're letting fear be their guiding light. They're letting the woundedness be the motivation for their words and actions in relationships. A lot of times this leads to expectations and obligations that they put upon a certain relationship that are impossible to fill, and ultimately leads them to feeling like a complete failure in their intimate relationships. And I recognize them. I recognize myself in them. I have felt that way too. And it's what kept me perpetually experiencing these relationships that never seemed to be what I want, that were unfulfilling, and that always ended up in heartbreak. It doesn't have to be this way. And this is why this subject of relationship diversity is so important to me, because it takes the shoulds and the have-tos out of your relationships. This is the scenario where all the shame of not doing it right, not being good at relationships can finally be released. It releases the societal programming or rules that someone else has determined makes a relationship good. Relationship diversity says, who am I and what do I really want in my relationship? And then what is keeping me from experiencing that? What is the woundedness? Let me go inside and look at what that is so that I can release it. This brings you the freedom to be your own unique person in your own unique relationships. Therefore, the main qualifier of a fulfilling, successful relationship in the context of relationship diversity becomes, am I being my true self in this relationship? And am I honoring my needs and desires while also honoring and being compassionate to my partners? The way to start reimagining all that our relationships can become is to have conversations. And not just any conversations, not just surface conversations, but open, real, and raw conversations about being in relationship with ourselves and others. And that is why I feel that now is the time to do this podcast, to invite you into the conversation. Let's lift the heaviness of shame and bring these conversations out into the open. I choose to create a world where my uniqueness is not only accepted, but it is celebrated. And it begins with me knowing, accepting, and loving myself so that I can be the first one to celebrate my true self. Now close your eyes and imagine yourself being you in your relationships. Even if you don't know who that you is yet, just imagine being you in your relationships, expressing yourself openly with love and being met by the other person. Imagine being seen and accepted. Imagine throwing out the rules that don't work for you and seeing how your relationship can be the fullest expression of who you are. I hope that you'll join me on this journey, because together we can explore and understand how to create the most beautiful, colorful, expansive, and diverse relationships. I believe that this could help us move out of the divisive world we've been experiencing to a more inclusive, vibrant, and loving world. Stay tuned and stay curious. Thank you for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are.